Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Depending on where you're joining us from, it's a pleasure to have you on Be Inspired series today. Be Inspired series is an initiative of the Women Supporting Women Network, a platform for us to interact, to exchange ideas, share inspirations, and discuss issues that affect our lives. And that's what we're doing again today. And of course, we prefer solutions to help us thrive and live our best lives. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Toyi Omozua, your host of the Inspired series. I hope you all had a restful weekend. The weekend is almost over, and I hope you're all doing good. Today, we're going to be looking at a very, very interesting topic, which says prioritizing self-care and mental health, prioritizing self-care and mental health. And we're hoping that after this webinar, we'll have a better understanding or an understanding of self-care and mental health and why it's important to our well-being. And of course, we'll be able to let go of old habits, old thoughts, old behaviors that no longer serve us. I'm looking forward to a very interactive forum. And I want to let you know that we have a capable hand on the call today, and that's my guest. Like we usually do, I want to just read an abridged version of his profile. Our guest on today's edition, let me spotlight him. Okay. Hi, Mr. OBK.
Hello, Toyin. Thank you for
How
having
are you
me on the
today?
show today. I'm good.
Okay, and that is your family as well?
Family is good.
Are you
thankful.
joining from Lagos or Abuja? Where are you
I'm
joining
actually in Abuja. I came in for my sessions here, so I'm in Abuja at the moment.
Oh, great, great, great. All right. I hope you're having a great time in Abuja.
Yes, as much as I can have. I am.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Mr. OBK is a certified life, marriage, and family therapist, counselor, author, trainer, and keynote speaker focused on everyday habits, vices, emotions, and their effects on individuals, families, marriages, and the nation at large. He has a first degree in cell biology and genetics with a master's in IT business. He has a certification in psychotherapy from the Karen Wells Institute in the US, a professional counseling certificate from the Institute of Counseling Nigeria, and a John Maxwell Leadership Program certification in SITE. He started counseling unofficially in 2008, advising youth groups in poverty-ravaged Lagos neighborhoods, ridden by teenage drug and sex abuse under the Grassroots and Shoots initiative. Over the past 5 years of running his private practice, that's Temple's Counsel and Mind Academy, he has gradually become a trusted community relationship, marriage, addiction recovery, and psychotherapy brand in Nigeria and across Africa. Temple also owns an advertising agency and has worked with key notable brands like MTN, Etisalat, Infinix, Arsenal FC, ChromePay Africa, CoinCola Asia, and many others. His private practice has positively empowered over 1,000 individuals through live counseling and thousands through his online counseling, podcasts, free advisory services, and materials. Readership of his articles also receive a growing number of visitors alongside subscriptions to his email newsletter at templecounsel.com. His passion for empowering and uncovering the secrets to lifelong marriages and personal development led to his new book, Soul Bodyguard, available on Amazon and across other online and traditional stores. Temple OBK is happily married to his primary school sweetheart, and their union is blessed with 4 amazing children he's proud of. Once again, we welcome you, Mr. Temple OBK. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. And of course, it's an honor, to have you on the call. Thank you so much for making our time for this.
Thank you, Toyin, once more.
All right, so the floor is yours. I hand over to you now. I'm sure you want to share your screen, so I'll make that, enable that.
Okay.
So please go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for making out time this beautiful weekend to join us today for the show. Thank you, Toyin, for putting this together. As always, we're grateful.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So without wasting much time, today we're talking about prioritizing self-care and mental health. Now, you see, in the world we find ourselves today, we cannot, everybody seems to have heard about self-care and mental health. But in actual fact, the question still remains, do we know precisely what these terms mean? And what exactly does this term mean for us? Now, self-care, in my opinion, is not an indulgence or an excuse to join a trend. Because if we were candid with ourselves, we cannot help but state that self-care and mental health seems to be the mantra everyone seems to be chanting these days. Everybody's talking about self-care and self-care, and everybody's chanting about mental health. You know, so unfortunately, as with everything else, a lot of people have joined this bandwagon, and to some very worrisome degree, a lot of people have also decided that mental health has also become a reason for aberrant behavior that does not do anyone any good. I've seen the whole concept of mental health cause issues even in homes. Now, it is simply a regeneration technique that does not require any external approval or stimuli, but a personal permission to self. This is a permission you give to yourself. You first of all need to believe in the fact that you require and you truly deserve self-care for you to be able to give yourself self-care as a gift. Having said that, it is important to take note of the causes of, because we see a lot of people around us today who are victims of poor mental health. And sometimes we wonder, where do these things begin from? Childhood abuse, trauma, or neglect is one of the key causative agents of poor mental health. Social isolation or loneliness, experiencing discrimination and stigma, including racism, social disadvantage, poverty, or debt. Of course, we cannot overemphasize on the fact that we know what the economy is all about at this point. And with this particular point alone that borders on poverty or debt, now we can understand that a lot of people who find themselves on the unfortunate side of the economic divide, why they are traumatized by poor mental health and why they do not indulge in proper self-care. The next points here are bereavement, severe or long-term stress, or having a long-term physical health condition. Now, at this point, I decided to make out some time and to bring out certain important statistics as it concerns depression. Depression being one of the endpoints of poor mental health, because for most people who you see who are actually suffering from poor mental health, one of the key things you see that they go through is depression. In extreme cases, you see that these people also become suicidal. Now, at this point, I'd like to mention that 66 million women in sub-Saharan Africa suffer from depression. And of this 66 million, only 85% of them, or rather only 25% of them, have access to effective treatment, meaning that your other 85 do not even have access to effective treatment. Now, 2 times more women are affected at twice the rate of men. It means that you have, for every 1 man you have affected with depression, you have 2 more women affected. Now, depression is something that we've currently noticed. And of course, you know, for coming from someone who sits across a lot of clients on a daily basis and see people battling depression, one thing I've come to notice is that pre-COVID, if we were to use the COVID period as a point of reference, one thing we've come to notice is that pre-COVID and post-COVID, the number of depression cases that are being treated is hitting an alarming high. And when I say an alarming high, it's almost like we've noticed about a 60% increase in the number of people who come in based on depression-related cases. And for these people who come in, 75 to 80% of them most times are women. Now, for every one woman who recovers from depression, 4 members of her household feel the benefits of that recovery. And this goes a long way to tell us that it is important in the world we find ourselves today that women especially, not meaning that we are excluding the men, but women especially need to be taken into consideration whenever we have conversations around mental health and conversations around self-care. Now, having said this, I think it's important for us to sort of have a clear understanding of what self-care and mental health truly implies. Starting from self-care, I would want to mention that self-care, as the name implies, obviously is care for yourself as an individual. Now, secondly, you find out that the practice of activities that are necessary to sustain life, reduce stress, and improve health is also something that we can categorize as self-care. Looking after yourself so you can give your best and provide value to the world, to the society, and to your immediate family is also something that we can categorize as self-care. Now, the last point is very important for a reason I will point out really soon. Proper self-care must cover these aspects, which are emotional, physical, spiritual, social, and mental aspects of your person. Now, looking at the list of things that I mentioned here that proper self-care must cover, you will notice that here we have the mental aspects of what we do as part of the reasons why, or part of the aspects that must be covered by proper self-care. And the reason this was mentioned is because when it comes to self-care, we generally tend to notice that a lot of people usually stop at the mental aspect of things. When people talk about self-care, they tell you about their mental health or the state of it. This simply means that self-care, as it is all encompassing. It just does not stop at mental health, which is why a lot of people who embark on the quest for self-care end up not achieving what they set out to achieve because they are only focusing on an aspect of self-care, which is the mental aspect of self-care, forgetting that there are other aspects that need to be put into consideration. Now, mental health is simply care for one's mental wellness, looking after yourself in a way that enables you give your best mentally to your environment, to your family, and to your business or career, depending on which you're into as well. And lastly, when it comes to mental health covers environmental mastery, personal growth, positive relations with other people around you, your purpose in life, and self-acceptance. If your mental health does not touch on your purpose in life, your self-acceptance, your relationship with other people around you, and your personal growth, it is actually something you need to include. Because at that point, what will generally happen is that you will find out that even after you have embarked on the quest for mental health, you are bound to get to a point where you start to experience some form of regression. Having said this, I think it will be important for us to focus first on mental health before we go into self-care, seeing that mental health is only a subset of self-care. Now, what is mental health? Our definition for mental health today will be derived from the World Health Organization. WHO describes mental health as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stress of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, at this point, it goes without saying that for you to consider yourself as an individual who is mentally healthy, you must be able to satisfy these criteria that have been mentioned in this description. And for emphasis sake, I'll mention this again. You first of all need to be able to realize your own abilities. you need to be able to cope with the normal stress of life, and you need to work productively, and you should be able to make a contribution to your community. And you see, it's important to take note of these, because there are certain schools of thought that will tell you that when it comes to mental health is a state you achieve when you're able to avoid any stressors in your life. In actual fact, this is quite erroneous, because stress is an everyday element in our individual lives. And for us to be able to get rid of stress, it simply means that you are actually taking away an opportunity for yourself to grow. Because most times, a lot of the growth we experience in our personalities as human beings come in the periods where we are most stressed out, because it's at that period that you find out you've developed coping mechanisms that can enable you handle these issues in ways that you even did not know you had available, or that you could actually muster enough courage to embark upon. So stress is one of the things that helps you determine and develop coping strategies around life. Having said that, it's important for us to delve into the concept of stress. Stress is your body's way of responding to any kind of demand or threat. Now, I'm sure most of us are very familiar with the flight or fight response. The flight or fight response is a situation or a condition your body goes into when it senses perceived threats. One of the things that triggers this state is stress. Now, stress is something that I'd like to mention that, you see, the same way we relate with fear. Fear and stress are alike in certain ways, because when it comes to the concept of being afraid, you find out that most of the things you're afraid of, and of course, if we were to append a figure to it, let's say at least most times 60% of the things you generally are afraid of usually don't end up happening. In that same way, stress by itself, you generally find out that whether these are real threats or whether they're imagined threats, most times it is usually more imagined than real. And if you do not handle the stress that affects you, it could affect your blood pressure, your heart condition, and depression. Now, at this point, it's important to mention something. There is a neurotransmitter found in our body, and this neurotransmitter is called cortisol. Cortisol is something your body secretes when you're under high stress levels. When you are stressed out, you almost are in a situation where the cortisol content in your body is drowning you out. And at this point, I'd like to mention that cortisol by itself has adverse effects on the body, from decreased metabolism to hypertension, to chronic fatigue, to sleep deprivation, which is one of the things you generally notice when you're stressed, migraines, tunnel vision, hostility, hunger, a decrease in your immune system. And it is important to also mention that cortisol levels in your body could trigger depression. Now, the thing is this: when you are under stress, there are certain things that you must ensure that you put into consideration. And these things have a name. They are called triggers, or for the sake of what we're doing today, you can also call them stressors. A trigger is simply an emotional, mental, healthy, or psychological thing. And how it affects you is that it is a spark of intense negative emotions. These emotions are the things, most times they can be abrupt. These are things that affect you in a way that logically, if you were to figure it out, you find out that most of your triggers are things that are either perceived as well, or they are actual threats. A trigger could either be internalized or it could be externalized. In psychology, we have what we call the people, place, or thing rule, meaning that your trigger will actually be categorized under these three things. But for the sake of what we're doing today, I'd like to expand these three categories that triggers could fall into, to mention the other aspects of triggers Because for every single time you're stressed, the reason we get stressed is because it's not because of what is happening to us. It's because we've not been able to anticipate the problems we're about to experience. Meaning that if you have a clearer understanding of what your triggers are, you most in generally will be more prepared. You will be in a prepared state of mind to handle whatever stress comes your way. But as with everything human, most times we figure out that we allow ourselves get stressed before we start figuring out ways to mitigate the stress we're feeling. Having said this, a trigger can either be a sound. When you hear a certain sound or music associated with a trauma you have experienced in times past, it could bring back a feeling. It could be a person. There are people that when you see them, either relations or people who are far removed from you, there are certain things that they exhibit that suddenly become a trigger for you. There are certain thoughts that when you think of them, things when you remember them, it brings back traumatic events that have happened to you. A smell could also trigger you. Our smell is highly connected to our memories. There are things you smell today and it takes you back to something that has happened to you in your childhood. A scent could be a trigger. At this point, a place as well could be a trigger, meaning that there's something a place you can visit today. And the moment you get there, it triggers something that has happened to you as an infant, as an adolescent rather. And you figure out that the moment you're there, because this place looks vaguely familiar or it reminds you of something, it comes with a flush of traumatic feelings. It bothers your mental health. Media as well, especially in a time where, depending on the apps you have on your phone, we are flooded with all sorts of things. If you're somebody who wants to take absolute control of your mental health and its triggers, one of the things you must learn to do for yourself is to control the influx of information that comes to you through media. Feelings, which could be an emotion, can trigger a trauma like a sad feeling or being in pain. Lastly, situations. If you find yourself in a situation, maybe a job loss, or you broke up from a relationship you've been in for a while, it could trigger a traumatic event that has happened to you in times past. Triggers are very important things. At the end of this workshop, one of the things I will do is through Toyin, of course, we will share what we call a trigger sheet. What the trigger sheet is supposed to do for you is help you put pen to paper. Because when you're able to collate your triggers, one of the things that generally begins to happen to you is you can anticipate certain things before they happen to you. Meaning that if you get to a place and you hear a particular sound, you already know that this sound for you will trigger certain feelings. So what it does is it puts you in a place where you're able to adequately mitigate the effects of that feeling or the effects that feeling is going to have on you. So it makes you prepared to handle stress because you already know what your triggers are. Having said that, it's time for us to get to self-care. Now, self-care, according to the World Health Organization, is your ability or the ability of an individual, a family, or a community to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. This is what the WHO describes as self-care. Of course, to the layman, self-care is simply your ability to go outside of everything happening around you to provide adequate care for yourself, or what we call in psychology self-soothing, which seems to be a part of self-care or a subset of self-care. But if we're looking for an apt description of self-care, it is something that must contain you as an individual. It is something that can also happen on a family level. It is something that can also happen on a communal level. Now, there are certain things I feel is important for us to understand about self-care, because at the beginning of this presentation, I said something about, people turning mental health and self-care into a trend. Truth be told, what works for one person must not work for you, especially when it comes to self-care, because there are various aspects of self-care. Your first point of call is to determine what aspect of self-care applies to you and what aspect of self-care you should be concentrating on as it concerns yourself. Self-care is a personal journey for you and will look different for each person. I have seen people who sit in at counseling sessions and they tell me that when it comes to self-care, their idea of self-care is going to a spa or having a hot bath with a rubber duck. And I'm like, this is amazing. But what aspect of your stress levels does it apply to? And for all you cared, you could find out that this person telling you that self-care for them simply means going to a spa. Maybe the current thing that's bothering them is highly financial, or it's a spiritual concern for them, or it's an emotional concern. And for them, they are actually applying the wrong type of self-care to a present concern. So the first thing you must do when it comes to self-care is understand what applies to you, understand your personal journey, and understand what self-care means in relation to the personal journey you're currently on. The second thing is self-care looks after your mental, emotional, and physical health. Self-care can reduce the occurrence of women caught in trauma-bound relationships. And this is important because if you do not know how to take care of yourself, you may not even be able to recognize trauma when it hits you. You may not even be able to recognize abuse when you're smack in the middle of it. And in recent times, one of the things we're starting to notice, especially as it concerns the women, is that a lot of women are in relationships that are defined in psychology as trauma-bound relationships. What is a trauma-bound relationship? A trauma-bound relationship is a relationship between an abused victim and an abuser, where the abused victim is connected to the abuser either by emotions or due to self-pity. And what happens is you find out that these people who are abused are usually caught up in these relationships. And one of the ways, I'll give you very clear examples of what a trauma-bound relationship looks like. On a family level, a trauma-bound relationship is where you find situations where a husband who is physically abusive and beats his wife, pushes his wife around, and all of a sudden the wife musters courage and decides, you know what, today I am going to get across to the appropriate authorities. I am going to report physical abuse. And you see a situation where this woman musters the courage, reports it, and all of a sudden the appropriate authorities turn up. Okay, so madam, Oya, describe what happened. And all of a sudden, you see this woman, she suddenly decides that, you know what, she may not, or she's not willing to proceed with this information. On the face of it, it looks like a woman who had a rethink, you know, a love-based rethink. But in actual fact, it's actually trauma-based. Another clear example, especially as it concerns, because trauma-bound relationships can also happen. It doesn't have to happen just only within the confines of a romantic relationship. It could also happen between people, religious leaders, and the people who follow them. We have seen situations where religious leaders have been known to walk over the people, their congregants, physically stepping on them. We've seen situations where people have committed mass suicide because at the bidding of their religious leader. Lastly, the last example I would like to give when it comes to a trauma-bound relationship is something that we're all very conversant with, which we call the Stockholm Syndrome. The Stockholm Syndrome was simply an occurrence where a bank was robbed by a group of people and they held certain hostages. And the hostages that were held, after an extended period of time, as at the time these hostages were released and they were to testify against the robbers, we found out that a bulk of the hostages who were held suddenly didn't feel the need to testify against the robbers because some form of affection had developed, some form of intimacy had developed, some form of connection had developed between the abused person and their abuser. These are actually just clear examples of trauma-bound relationships. And we have a lot of relationships, especially the ones who have been in relationships over an extended period of time, that are trauma-bound. And one of the key causes of trauma-bound relationships are from individuals who, from their very tender ages, have had very dysfunctional attachment styles. Attachment styles are it's something I will not be going into at the moment, but it is deeply rooted in the attachment styles they had with their parents. It is informing the quality of relationships they have in present times with their partners. And some of them have been nurtured all their life to actually accept abuse. And this is why they are in this sort of relationships. Self-care can also improve your mood and reduce anxiety. Lastly, self-care is the key to a good relationship with oneself and others. Now, there are certain myths I'd like to debunk about self-care, because when you talk about self-care, some of the things you hear is, oh, self-care is expensive. Self-care is selfish because it means that you're just concentrating on yourself and you're leaving out everybody around you. That is totally not true. Self-care is time-consuming. The truth is, the time you do not spend on yourself, if something else came up, you will still end up spending that time and sometimes resources as well in trying to solve the need. Self-care must be earned. No, self-care must not be earned. It is not something you do to reward yourself all the time. There are days you just embark on self-care simply because you want to care for yourself. It's not every time you must earn it. There are days you just do it, you wing it. Go out there, give yourself a good time, whatever that means, and however that applies to the aspect of your life that needs to be cared for. The last thing I hear is self-care is for women. No, self-care is not only for women. Men can also embark on self-care. Now, it is important to take note of the types of self-care that actually exist. We have psychological self-care, which is also mental health care, which is where we get the term mental health care from, because mental health care is a type of self-care. So, which was the reason we took we went through the process of trying to explain at the beginning of this presentation the difference between self-care and mental self-care. Aside from that, we have the physical self-care, we have emotional self-care, we have spiritual self-care, personal and professional self-care. Now, these are very broad concepts. And if we started describing them today, we may not be able to finish. So what I'm going to do is, on each of these, I'm going to mention just 2 to 3 aspects that could cater to it. So under physical self-care, it could involve regular medical care for yourself. It could then involve getting a massage. And it could involve something as simple as hugging and holding hands with your partner. And the reason this is here is you need to understand that you don't need to go the extra mile to get self-care. Just right there in your living room, by holding hands with your partner or by hugging, you could actually be giving yourself physical self-care. Psychological self-care is when you take time for self-reflection, when you go in for therapy or counseling, or when you're simply being creative from where you are. That is something that gives you a boost. What it does is it releases a hormone known as serotonin. Serotonin is almost, it's a feel-good hormone. It releases it. When you're creative, when you're happy doing what you do, you feel good about yourself. Under your emotional self-care, you could pick up a new hobby. If you're someone who has a lot that has been affecting you, keeping yourself in a place and actually letting out a deluge of emotions by either laughing or crying, as the case may be, is you being emotionally in tune with yourself. You're caring for yourself emotionally. It may not sound like it, but there are a lot of people who, by pressures mounted on them by society, you find out that, especially for the men folk, you find out that men these days are of the opinion that men don't cry, men don't show emotions. You must be there, you must weather the storm for the family on behalf of everyone else, be strong on everybody's behalf. Whereas a lot of men, when you sit with them in therapy, you see men who have been saddled with a lot. You see men cry. And after that, one of the things you generally notice is that they feel lighter. So crying is a form of emotional self-care. Spiritual self-care is something that even in regular therapy, we approach it from a very cautious point of view, because the moment you go spiritual, it is already assumed that this has become religious counseling. But whereas the world we live in today, people are in a hurry to exclude the spiritual aspect of things without understanding that it plays a key role when it comes to the makeup or their makeup as individuals. In spiritual self-care, you could practice forgiveness. You see people, for every time you're unforgiven, it's all, for everybody you cannot forgive, it's like an extra chain that goes out from your body attached to the person. So it simply means you're carrying a lot of weight on you. Practicing forgiveness is a form of spiritual self-care. Singing or dancing is a form of spiritual self-care. Volunteering for a cause, something you're interested in, is a form of spiritual self-care. Going to personal self-care, this is where it becomes really important, because a lot of people in their attempt to practice self-care do not understand that the first point of call for self-care is your personal self-care. And it is important I mention that under personal self-care, which is why I mentioned initially that when it comes to self-care, there is no room. It is a permission you give to yourself first. You must personalize it before you start going to every other aspect. Planning and setting goals, spending time with your family, learning a new skill, reading a book, making time out for your friends to socialize, reflecting on who you are and what makes you special. These are some of the aspects of personal self-care that must be embarked upon. Lastly is professional or career self-care. You see, there is no need going to an office where you sit down and lunch break, take lunch break, no. Take your leave, no. The fact that you're there all the time does not mean you're more, or it doesn't in any way make you more productive. We must learn to take advantage of the measures that have been put in place to improve our productivity as individuals. On the career front, make sure you take your lunch breaks fully. Leave work at work and go home and concentrate on family. Your life/work dichotomy must be intact. Your life-work balance must be intact. Leave work at work, go home and be home. Learn to say no. A lot of people at the office go there and become mini politicians. Simply because you do not want to step on the wrong toes, or you do not want to be on the wrong side of a certain group at the office. People go there and they learn, if you can, please pardon my French, become little ass lickers, because at this point, all they want to do is please everybody. You can't please everybody and displease yourself in the process. Learn to say no. Saying no is a way of creating a boundary for yourself. Use your vacation time. There's a reason why you have vacations. As someone who works in a corporate environment, it is a period you use for rejuvenation. It is a period you use to get back yourself. It is a period you use to plan. It is not just about moving around randomly, buying random things, going on holidays. No, it is a period of rejuvenation. And lastly, on the career front, set boundaries. Now, self-care reflection. There are ways to maintain proper self-care/mental health. You need to be someone who gets regular exercise. Exercise does something to you. Exercise releases a lot of serotonin into the bloodstream, and this is your feel-good hormone. For every time you have an influx of serotonin, it has been noticed, and this is research-based, it has been noticed that serotonin has a way of making the skin color a lot more radiant. Also learn to eat healthy, regular meals and stay hydrated. Even if you do not have an instant source of accessing a meal, always ensure that you stay hydrated. You cannot overemphasize the importance of water in maintaining a good mental health state. Make sleep a priority. The average adult needs at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep every single day. But most times we find out that due to our due to the things we need to do, due to our itinerary, you find out that a lot of people generally tend to work late into the night. And after all of this, you have to wake up early. And I'll give a very clear example. For my people out there in Lagos, we have people who wake up as early as 4 a.m. and they start getting ready for work. By 5 a.m., they're in traffic, and traffic takes them at least another 2-3 hours to get to the office. They get to the office around 9, and they work 9 to 5, and they get into traffic, and they stay in traffic for another 4 or 5 hours before they get home. At the end of the day, they go to sleep around 12 a.m. and they wake up by 4 a.m. again. There is no way that individual can be fully functional. They may function, they may get by at work, but truth be told, that individual is a disaster waiting to happen. The next thing we must prioritize is try to relax. Try a relaxing activity. It is not a sin to relax. There are times we've been in therapy and we've seen people who actually believe that it is overindulgence to get themselves to try out something that helps them relax. You are not overindulging yourself. It's not a form of self-indulgence trying to relax. Relaxation is actually a gift you decide to give to yourself. And it must not be earned. If you remember what we mentioned in the previous slides, it must not be earned. It mustn't always be earned. There are days you relax for the sake of relaxation. Leave everything, relax. The next thing here is you must set goals and priorities, because setting a goal and a priority gives you something to look forward to. And you must append a timeline to your goals and priorities. If not, it's simply a wish list. Once you append a timeline to your goals and your priorities, it does something. There's a laser-like focus you begin to enjoy because you simply find out you're starting to work towards a direction. That focus by itself is something that gives you a balanced mental health, knowing that you're not just coasting around. You are focused, you are determined, you are going and headed towards somewhere. The next thing we must learn to do if we're to practice proper self-care and maintain a balanced mental health is gratitude. Gratitude is a lifestyle. Gratitude most times really has nothing to do with what is working and what isn't. It simply has everything to do with what you decide to prioritize and be thankful for as it concerns your life. Gratitude is a mind state that keeps you expectant. And if we understand anything about the laws of attraction, when we are in a very expectant mind state, we generally tend to attract good things to ourselves. So being grateful keeps you in an expectant mood, eternally in an expectant mood. And without knowing it, you have actually activated one of the greatest laws in life, which is the law of attraction. Meaning that when you're grateful, more things come to you. The next thing here is focusing on positivity. Positivity is a mind state. Positivity, like gratitude as well, has nothing to do with what is happening. It has everything to do with what you decide and how you decide to stay. The last thing here is stay connected. Staying connected, by staying connected, I mean the social aspect of your life must not be shelved. You see, when people tell you that they are depressed, depression is simply as a result of the fact that you may have decided, either actively or knowingly, to keep yourself away. When you keep yourself away from the social aspect of your life, you actually amplify the effects of depression on your life. When you stay connected to loved ones, it is rare that you slip into a depression and there is nobody around you to notice there is nobody around you to reach out to you, to assist you in pulling you out of that depressive mind state. But when you're somebody who gets to a point where you begin to close yourself in, maybe because of the pressures or the stress, you are bound to be affected by depression. Now, for the sake of time, I would have wanted us to practicalize something, but I want us to take a very good look at what we have here. I will also share this presentation with Toyin, and I will also share some resource materials that you can use to figure out what your triggers are and build a plan that will put you ahead of any stress you might actually encounter. Now, this is actually an abridged version of that exercise, because on the area of self-care, you have to list the type of self-care you hope to embark upon. And you have to also list the activity that you are carrying out in this area of self-care. When you list out the activities you're carrying out, you have something to hold yourself accountable to. You can always come back here. You can always come back here. You can re-examine the list. You can add new things. You can remove old things. For anything you feel that you've been able to achieve, you can remove it and replace something new. And this is in terms of the activities. Now, while mentioning the types of self-care, I also didn't mention financial, but it is important to note that your finances are a very key aspect of self-care. The choices you make or refuse to make as it concerns your financial life have the propensity, have the ability to throw you into a state of into a depressed state or into a shattered sense of self. Thank you so much for listening. And this is the end of our presentation from me. And at this point, I am very willing to entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Wow. I wish you could really go on and on. It's been quite an interesting session, very interesting and educative one, quite enlightening. Thank you so much, Mr. Obike. Thank you for this time with you. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Do we have questions? We've looked at self-care. We've looked at the difference between self-care and mental health. We've looked at the myths that debunked some myths about self-care. We looked at types of self-care, practical session. We talked about if there's anything I really love so much and I've been working on, in recent times, is this idea of setting healthy boundaries, and the ability to say no. So most times we believe that when we say no, it's so difficult for many of us to say no, but I've learned over time to say no unapologetically. And I thank you so much for, re-emphasizing that today. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll call you to ask your question. And then you could unmute your mic or you could type in your question in the comment section. Okay. Thank you for emphasizing that self-care is for men too. Yeah, very good.
Precisely, Bimbo. Because a lot of men believe in the fact that they must stay strong, on behalf of everyone else, and it breaks them down. Yes,
that's true. That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any question from anyone as we begin to round up the session for today? We're supposed to do this for an hour actually, and if you have a question, please raise your hand or a comment or something you're not sure about, you wanted to emphasize on. Please feel free to indicate so that we can quickly take that. And thank you so much, Mr. Obike, for the resource materials that you said you'll make available to us. Thank you for that as well.
You're welcome.
Any question? No question? Okay, Mr. Agoro, please unmute your mic. He's raising his hand. Good to see you again after a very long time. We really missed you. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry I've been so busy here and there. Anyway, I thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. And
thank you.
I think it's going to have an impact on me. But I before now, I have this feeling that, well, I work in a place where I get paid, and I said to myself, aside from getting paid, when you have extended family here and there, I need to pay myself. I need to enjoy myself. So in the course of enjoying myself, I equally remove, because you have endless what's it called now? Demands. So I equally remove some percentage out of that salary solely for myself. If I want to go on vacation, I do it for myself. If I want to eat anything, I eat for myself. If I want to buy anything, I buy for myself. And I don't compromise on that.
Awesome.
Can I equate that to be self-care too?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question.
What the question I'm asking is, all these things I've been doing, can one say this is part of self-care?
Precisely. What you're doing, you've been practicing personal self-care. And as much as your practice of personal self-care was something you did using finances as a tool, but in actual fact, you have been practicing personal self-care. Because you see, a lot of people feel very guilty doing what you've done. There are a lot of men who can't afford to bring out anything. It's almost like they need permission. They need to be permitted by someone. It's not like anyone told them not to do it, but they feel everything needs to go into family. And sometimes for others, they simply just feel selfish about it. Oh, maybe I'm being selfish by removing something for myself. No, it's not. It's self-care.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We have another question here in the chat box. It says, what is the best way to help an abuse victim accept he or she is being abused? Most often they make excuses for the abuser. Self-care versus selfish. How do we distinguish?
Great. You see, when it comes to an abuser versus an abused scenario, one of the things we usually request is that, first of all, you need to firstly educate yourself. You need to educate yourself because it's important that you understand what it means to be abused. A lot of people are in abusive relationships and marriages, and they don't even know that the marriage they're in is abusive. It takes an external party to come and see them function in their environment to tell them, you know what, there's something very toxic about this relationship or this marriage. So first of all, you need to know what it looks like to be in an abusive relationship. A lot of people out there have had, due to childhood trauma, backgrounds where they are coming from, their families. They've seen fathers beat mother. They've seen mother use weaponized emotions on father. So for them, their threshold for these things they've been desensitized towards it. So if you don't know what it looks like, you wouldn't even recognize it. That's the first thing for the abused. The second thing for the abused is you need to speak up. You see, there's no need being in an abusive relationship or recognizing that your relationship is abusive and then deciding to stay, maybe based on the fact that you are ashamed. You don't want it to look like your marriage has failed, or you don't want it to look like you got the worst end of the marital stick. No. When you find out, you speak up, go to the appropriate authorities, report it. If the abuser is very insistent and refuses to change. Lastly, I'd like to mention, if you find out you're in an abusive relationship, please ensure that you have a very strong social circle around you. Social circle could be family-based, it could be your siblings, or if you decide to make it someone external, it must be somebody who is objective and who is rooting for your marriage, not somebody who has been wishing that you come out of your marriage, or an old boyfriend or old girlfriend who is actually praying that you come out. Somebody who is supportive of your union and who can remain objective. Reach out and tighten your social circles, because an abuser thrives on intimidation. And what the abuser is only looking for is a situation where they can get control and power. Once they get the power and the control dynamic in a marriage, where you doubt your self-esteem, and you allow them make all the decisions, then you have given the abuser what they want, power and control. Those are the two things an abuser wants from you. I hope that answers your question.
All right, very quickly, because of time, Abiba is saying, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. My question is, how do we handle handle environmental stressors like traffic and all the risks that we are daily exposed to in Nigeria?
All right, great. Habiba, because for most of the people you find out there in traffic, these are people who are commuting to and fro work. What it does to them is, because they are mandated to be there, they just have to go through, the traffic. However, if you have the choice to make your own decisions on the job, or you work in a semi-flexible workplace, one of the things is what you could do is what people are currently doing. You take an option to work from home certain days, be at work on some days, or you can actually decide, you know what, maybe move closer to your office. You see, unfortunately, the environmental stressors most times will always be there. So what you do is you need to build a plan. You need to build a trigger sheet that prepares you to handle them, because they will always be there. Traffic will always be there. So protect yourself by building something. Either while you're in traffic, listen to an audiobook. While you're in traffic, listen to soothing music. While you're in traffic, just do something. Do something that removes your whole concentration on the environmental stressor that's affecting you.
Okay, I think this question is similar to the one that Mr. Aguru asked earlier, I guess. It says, this is from Mrs. Uwanwa. Most times I make money and before I know it, it's all gone into taking care of the home. Recently, I made some money and decided to get some personal things for myself. My question is, how do I not get guilty doing this? Because I get guilty when I do so.
Oh, it's very simple. The first thing you need to understand is that you deserve it. Once you know you deserve it, first and foremost, that's the first point. Do you deserve?
We can't hear you again.
Description I gave on the first slide.
Okay.
It is the permission you give yourself.
Okay, then there's another one here. I think that will be the last one because of time. Okay, this is from Mrs. Komolafe. What is the best way to help an abuse victim accept he or she is being abused? Most often they make excuses. Okay, I think I've read this before.
I think so.
Yes, it's answered that. Thank you very much.
It's answered, yes. I saw another one. Let me just be sure we don't have any. An abuser also seeks to seclude, just a minute. An abuser also seeks to seclude you from those that love you and could give you advice. They make sure you have no social circle. All right, I think that's a comment in addition to what you said. I can't see any other question. I think, okay, this will be the last question because of time. We're fast spent. This is just a minute after 9. I think this will be the last question, please. This is from Bironke Fagade, says, thanks for the presentation, really helpful. Can you clarify if it is possible to forgive and move on without, I missed that.
Without the person you've forgiven.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I think, I think what this person is trying to ask is this: is it possible for you to forgive someone and move on, even if the person you've forgiven is not going to be part of your moving on process? Now, the thing is, forgiveness is two-pronged. There's forgiveness that happens because you, first of all, for the sake of your mental health, you know that you need to let go, you need to forgive, so that you can even recover yourself first. Because it's when you have yourself intact that you can even bother about any other external things that are plaguing you. That's the first aspect to forgiveness. But there's forgiveness that happens, especially if in cases of infidelity. In cases of infidelity, we notice that there's a forgiveness that occurs when you find out that the person who has actually, who has destroyed trust in the marriage is actually putting in steps and is being very, how do I put it? They are actually being intentional towards ensuring that whatever mistakes were made are not repeated, without even asking you to forgive them. Simply seeing the fact that this person is being fixated and this person is intent on ensuring this does not happen. Without knowing it, you begin to release the anger you feel towards this person. It dissipates, no matter how you try to hold on to it. Intentionality has a way of dissipating anger. So without knowing it, you start to forgive. So the first aspect of forgiveness is one, you forgive for the sake of your mental health. The second aspect is where you forgive because of what you see the person doing to remediate or to sort of make up for what it was they did to you. So in a situation you're moving on without the person, it will be the first, where you forgive for the sake of your mental health and move on. So yes, in answering your question, it is possible.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Temple Obike. It's been a very rewarding evening, I must say, very, very rewarding one. I believe we've gotten so much value for our time. And I want to say thank you so much for making this an enriching session. Thank you so much for making our time for this. We sincerely appreciate you. And to our audience, we say thank you for being an amazing audience. Without you, we can't be having this. Thank you for always being there. I know I can't start, because of time, I can't start mentioning names of those that come every now and then. They're always there on the call. Thank you so much. We truly, truly appreciate you. And let me say that the video recordings will be made available to us tomorrow by God's grace. And as soon as our guest makes available the resource materials, they will also be disseminated to you via your email address. So please, if you're not on our mailing list, would you kindly just put your email address in the chat box so they can get the resource materials to you, and of course send you the link to the video recording, because it's always good to listen to this over again and to help you design your self-care plan or develop your self-care plan as well. So if you don't have your email addresses, please put it in the chat box. If you don't want an email, you want to receive the link to the video recording, or you want to receive subsequent invitations via a WhatsApp number, you could decide to also put that in the chat box or send to me personally. Thank you very much. And just before we go, as we usually do, even though we're far behind the time, we usually welcome those who are coming for the first time, our first timers on the webinar. Please, if we have anyone join us for the first time, I would like to know you and where you're joining from. Kindly indicate, unmute your mic, and or just raise your hand. We'll call you, and you'll mute your mic and tell us your name and where you're joining from and how you got to know about the webinar. Very quickly, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fatima Mohammed. I'm joining for the first time.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Hi, Fatima Mohammed.
Oh.
Joining for the
Ajia.
first time from Benin City.
Good to have you, Ajia.
Information from Abibat.
Oh, thank you so much, Abibat, for spreading the news. Thank you so much for inviting Ajia to this program. We hope you got value for your time, Ajia.
Yes. I enjoyed the presentation.
We hope to see you again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other person? Okay, Birunke Fagade, joining for the first time from Abuja, was invited by Mr. Temple. Thank you, Mr. Temple, for inviting Birunke. Thank you so much for being a part of this, Birunke. We hope to see you again. Thank you. Any other person? Don't forget, drop your email addresses so they can get subsequent invitations, and you can have
I see Morufa
resource
there.
materials.
Morufa is here, Twin. Morufa.
Okay. Where's Marufa joining from? Hello, Marufa. I didn't get that. But good to have you on the call. Thank you so much for being a part of this. We hope to see you again. Any other person? Okay, no other person? Okay, I'm seeing a new message. I hope we have all the, okay, Marufa to say I'm joining for the first time. Thank you so much, Marufa. Good to have you. We hope to see you again. I hope you have all the email addresses. If you don't have your email address and okay, so it's on those notes we've come to the end of today's edition. I'm seeing Ikechi Isaac, even though you don't want to introduce yourself. Good to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Ikechi, good to have you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Biu. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being a great mentor. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I can't begin to mention all the names, but I truly appreciate you all. And I wish you a very good evening and an amazing week ahead. And don't forget, remain unstoppable. God bless you all. Bye-bye. Thank you, Isaiah. I saw you all the way from Benin. My prof, thank you. Orobs, thank you. Good to have you. Grace Ezo, thank you. Jerry, thank you so much for being a part of this. Akiru, good to have you. Thank you. Inox, good to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you, Olufunke, Mr. Jipulu, Ayobami, Zainab Owolabi, good to have you. Dennis, my friend, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.